Shradajat Upakartum Yogamaya Balodayam. Chata, Ovidura, Bhagavata, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Daiva Karma Atma Rupina, of the gigantic form of transcendental work, time, and nature. Who else? Shradajat can aspire. Upakartum, measure in totality. Yogamaya, internal potency. Bala Udayam, manifested by the strength of. Translation. O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Purport. The froggish philosophers may go on with their mental speculations on the subject matter of the Virat, the gigantic form exhibited by the Yogamaya internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But factually, no one can measure such a vast exhibition. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, the recognized devotee of the Lord, says, Aneka bahudara bhaktame netram pashyami tvam sarvato nantarupam nantam namajam napunastavadim pashyami vishveshvara vishvarupa. O my Lord, O gigantic Vishvarupa form, O Master of the universe, I see innumerable hands, bodies, mouths, and eyes in all directions, and they're all unlimited. I cannot find the end of this manifestation, nor do I see the middle, nor the beginning. Bhagavad Gita was specifically spoken to Arjuna, and the Vishvarupa was exhibited before him at his request. He was awarded the specific eyes to see this Vishvarupa. Yet, although he was able to see the Lord's innumerable hands and mouths, he was unable to see him completely. Since Arjuna was unable to estimate the length and breadth of the potency of the Lord, who else would be able to do so? One may only indulge in miscalculation like the frog philosopher. The frog philosopher wanted to estimate the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean by his experience of a well 3 cubic feet large. And thus he began to puff himself up to become as big as the Pacific Ocean. But at last he burst and died by this process. This story is applicable to the mental philosophers who, under the illusion of the Lord's external energy, indulge in estimating the length and breadth of the Supreme Lord. The best path is to become a cool-headed, submissive devotee of the Lord. Try to hear about the Lord from the bona fide spiritual master, and thus serve the Lord in transcendental loving service, as suggested in the previous verse. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As you've probably been hearing over the weeks, the Virat Rupa, or Vishvarupa, the universal form of the Lord, is a very interesting production. as today's verse is telling us, and as repeated early in the chapter, the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests this stage show, you could say, this universal form, which, as you may also remember, is not an eternal form of the Lord, but it is a production of the Lord. So in that sense, it could be said to be non-different from the Lord. The energy is non-different from the energetic source. Then again, it is different. The example I always like to remember about Achincha Beta Beta Tattva, simultaneous oneness and difference, is the example Srila Prabhupada gave about the cow and the milk. Very appropriate for New Govardhan, where there are cows and a Goshala and real milk. So he said, the milk comes from the cow. Without the cow, there's no milk. Therefore, you could say the milk is the same as the cow. But if you boil the milk, you don't boil the cow. So therefore, there's difference. So, the universal form is a production emanating from the internal potency of the Lord. Yet, Krishna doesn't ask you to focus on the universal form, although some may choose to do so. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritim ashrita vajantyananya manaso gyatva bhutadam avyam. Those who are actually Mahatmas, great souls, they are absorbed in the internal potency of the Lord, serving the internal potency of the Lord, who is inexhaustible and the original. And then in the next verse, Krishna further describes the Mahatma in terms of activities. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridhavrata. The Mahatma is always chanting my glories. And Maitreya is going to, in the next verse you'll hear tomorrow, talk about this behavior, about describing the glorification of the Lord. He says, otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste if I'm not speaking something in glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So back to Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about who is truly a Mahatma and what the activities of the Mahatma are. And then, just to show you how broad and non-sectarian Bhagavad Gita is, Krishna talks about others. Jnana yagyena chapyanye yajanto mam upasate. There are others who try to understand in a certain way. First of all, those who ekatvena prataktvena, those who see everything as one, including themselves. And then there are those who see everything as the supreme, pantheists, demigod worshippers, aboriginals who worship the tree and then the lightning and then this and that and the other. Ekatvena prataktvena bahuda vishvato mukam. And there are those who worship the universal form. Or, in more contemporary language, they say, I am the universe. I don't know if you've ever talked to someone who says like that. Someone was telling me just this past Sunday in Auckland. I asked a question at an outreach program. Well, who are you? Because the person was saying, well, I this and I that. Well, I said, first, before I answer the question, can you kindly tell me who you are? Who am I? The answer, I am the universe. It's kind of cool when you think about it. When you know, good line to repeat at a cafe when you're there with your friends or prospective partner. Yeah, I am the universe. You are the universe. This tendency to always want to be bigger than your little insignificant self is quite common. It's produced by the false ego, so much so that even you can become a great impersonalist And you have this goal still to be bigger than the biggest. How does that manifest? The common saying, if you can't beat him, join him. We're all the oneness. And such persons visualize a oneness of consciousness, one mass of consciousness. The only way that we can be one in consciousness is by dovetailing our individual consciousness with the will of the Supreme Consciousness. But that we can become the one consciousness is not possible. But because of that false ego produced by contact with material nature, we always want to be bigger than what we actually are. So this universal form you read about in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam. It appears from time to time. Just like before the Battle of Kurukshetra, Krishna went to the home, the palace of Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, and company to present a peace plan, and didn't get a very good reception. In fact, Krishna even showed a universal form to let everyone know that what I'm saying is not ordinary. That still didn't work. This shows you the independence of the living entity, that even you can see the universal form and you're still going to stick to your fallen ways. Dhritarashtra was temporarily affected. His line, I like the way Prabhupada explains it. Yes, I know Krishna's God, but I'm just too attached to my sons. I can't control my senses. And of course, Duryodhana was not swayed in the least. And then, of course, the universal form appeared when Mother Yashoda looked in Krishna's mouth, searching for dirt. The acharyas don't make it so clear whether Krishna actually ate the dirt or not. Sometimes in their commentaries, they say he ate it. Others, he pretended to eat. Others say, well, he ate it and swallowed the dirt. Therefore, Mother Yashoda couldn't see it. It's not the essential point, whether he ate the dirt or not. The essential point is what Mother Yashoda is going to see when she looks in his mouth. Because Krishna had convinced her that you need to do your own investigation because these boys, my cowherd boyfriends, are lying. I stopped playing with them, and so they are conspiring to present to you a falsity that I ate dirt. And Mother Yashoda replied, well, even your brother Balaram is saying the same thing. And Krishna would defend himself. No, they're all in cahoots together. No, it's not true. So that pushed Mother Yashoda to be empirical, to make an empirical scientific investigation. All right, open your mouth. And Krishna, of course, complied. He opened his mouth, and you know what she saw. And it took her quite some time to adjust seeing the universal form within Krishna's mouth. And she was wondering, am I dreaming? No, I'm wide awake. Is my mind becoming deranged? No, I'm in good health. What's going on? She couldn't make heads or tails, so to speak, of the situation. And then finally she concluded, this must be some magic done by my son. And that's when Krishna covered her over with his Yogamaya potency to stop her speculation. Because as long as she's metaphysically speculating, what is this I'm seeing? Where's the affection for Krishna? And Krishna wants her to feed him, to cuddle him. So therefore, as soon as she got too far with her mental speculation, her empirical investigation, what is this I'm looking at? Could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be my son? I don't know. Okay, the curtain of Yogamaya descended. And she said, well, whatever it is, he's just my little baby. That's the main thing. So back to Vatsalya Prem, love of Krishna in parenthood. The universal form shown by Arjuna, at Arjuna's request in Bhagavad Gita, as Krishna says, this one no one has ever seen before. So there are other appearances of the universal form in the Shastra, but Krishna told Arjuna, this one is special. No one's seen it before. It's a production, you could say a mystic production by Krishna. And it can be an authorized way of meditation for those who are averse to the two-handed personal form of the Lord. In other words, Bhagavatam has something for everyone. But in this day and age of turmoil, agitation, short living, the Shastra doesn't advise you meditate on the universal form. It advises, of course, to chant Hare Krishna. Still, the Bhagavatam contains everything, and Krishna himself, in a non-sectarian way, says, well, there are the bhaktas, and then there are others. And what do these others do? Ekatvena prataktvena. Some worship the oneness, thinking they are the ultimate. That's considered the lowest of the three categories. Others see God in everything. The rock is God, the stone is God, Indra is God, Durga is God. And still others worship the universal form, Bahuda Vishvato Mukham. So sometimes people, they accuse that, you Krishnas are just focusing on one way. But Bhagavad Gita presents other ways. At the same time, at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives his request. Abandon all your conceptions and just surrender to me. To me means to his personal form. He doesn't recommend that you focus on the universal form. He certainly doesn't recommend that you think ahangrahopasana, that you are one with everything. Nor does he recommend demigod worship, treating each demigod as the supreme. Doesn't recommend that. So although Krishna stresses bhakti in Bhagavad Gita, bhaktya mama vijanati, only by bhakti can I be understood, although he stresses that, at the same time he presents that there are others who do this, there are others who do that. So this is how I would say non-sectarian Bhagavad Gita is. It covers all the options, all the legitimate options. The lesser options are presented. Today is the appearance day of Gadadhar Pandit. Yes, he is a very intimate associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. A very intimate, some would give the transcendental opinion that Gadadhar Pandit is the most intimate member of the Panchatattva. The Acharyas describe that Gadadhar Pandit is Srimati Radharani, and also Lalita Devi, who's always accompanying Srimati Radharani. She's also there as Gadadhar Pandit. How a personality can be a combination is described more in Srimad Bhagavatam. It sounds materially inconceivable to us. Well, make up your mind. Are you this one or are you that one? But how the combination can be there requires our transcendental understanding. But suffice to say that Gadadhar Pandit was so intimately related to Lord Chaitanya. In Navadvip, Nimai Pandit was famous for challenging anyone to a debate. And so devotees like Mukunda, they would see Nimai Pandit coming on the street and they would cross to the other side because he would want to engage them in debate, which he always won. Gadadhar Pandit was more submissive, so he couldn't get away. Nimai Pandit came up to him. Gadadhar Pandit, describe to me what mukti is, what liberation is. Gadadhar Pandit was in a tight spot because he knew whatever he said, he'd be defeated. So he gave the standard Nyaya definition. Nyaya, the school of logic, which was very powerful in Navadvip at the time. Mukti means when everything material is just extinguished. So Lord Chaitanya defeated that. Nimai Pandit defeated that and then turned around and defeated what he had just said. So Gadadhar Pandit and other devotees like Mukunda, they got together and prayed to Krishna. If this Nimai Pandit is so inconceivably brilliant, if he would be a devotee, how wonderful that would be. And Lord Chaitanya heard about that. Oh, they're praying for me to be a devotee, eh? I thank them for such prayers. They'll see in time. So when Mahaprabhu took sannyas and came back to Navadvip, Gadadhar Pandit was the first to witness the ecstatic changes in Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was such an intimate associate that he was a prime personality in the Navadvip Leela as well as in Jagannath Puri. After Mahaprabhu left Navadvip and went to Puri, Gadadhar Pandit also came. He had the vow of Chaitra sannyas, a type of sannyas in which you never leave the holy dham that you're residing in. So he had a special place at Yameshwara Tota, the garden of Yameshwar. And there he set himself up, so to speak, and would associate with Mahaprabhu in that way. They were so close. Especially if you know the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He worshipped Gaur Gadadhar, the deity of Mahaprabhu and Gadadhar Pandit. Because Gadadhar Pandit, in his most intimate role, is Srimati Radharani. Of course, then you have Mahaprabhu himself, who can sometimes act as Krishna, sometimes act with the emotions of Srimati Radharani, and sometimes present himself as Srimati Radharani, and more confidentially, and Prabhupada mentions this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, sometimes Lord Chaitanya would present himself as a maid servant of Srimati Radharani. So all this is going on in Gaur Leela. At the same time, we don't worship Mahaprabhu as Gopinath. We don't disturb his wanting to be a devotee, not the master of the gopis. He wants gopi bhava. He wants to be absorbed in the mood of the gopis. So Mahaprabhu wanted to go to Vrindavan to find Krishna. And the devotees in Puri did their best to waylay him, to just prevent his departure. Oh, you have to wait for Rath Yatra, you can't go now. Oh, you have to wait for Dol Yatra, you can't go now. They would come up with a long list of Vaishnava festivals. How can you leave when this festival hasn't happened yet? Or that festival? Finally, Mahaprabhu pleaded with him, look, please let me go to Vrindavan. And devotees transcendentally felt a little bad. We've really delayed him. We've held him back for a while now. Yes, yes, you may go. And so Mahaprabhu left Jagannath Puri, and a mass of devotees followed him. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, too many devotees to name. He says, I'm only naming the most prominent ones, but there's so many who left Puri to accompany Mahaprabhu to Vrindavan. So you might say, then Gadadhar Pandit, what did he do? He tried to leave. And you might say, well, why couldn't he be successful in leaving? He's, some say, the most intimate associate of Mahaprabhu. Why didn't he just go? He tried. But Mahaprabhu told him, go back. You have two things that should keep you in Puri. Number one, your vow of Chaitra Sannyas, the particular form of sannyas in which you never leave the holy dham that you're residing in. And number two, your vow to always serve the Tota Gopinath deity. So you can't go with me. Otherwise, I would be guilty of allowing you to break your spiritual vows. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want to incur that blame. And what was Gadadhar Pandit's response? Chaitra Sannyas vow? The vow to never leave Jagannath Puri? Let it go to hell. Wherever you are, wherever you go, my Lord, that is Jagannath Puri. As far as my service to the Tota Gopinath deity, just by my seeing your lotus feet, I served the deity millions of times. I'm going with you. So Mahaprabhu said, again, I can't allow this because you'll be breaking your dharma. There are different types of dharma. There's karma dharma, ritualistic activities, good things you should do. And then there's bhakta dharma, the dharma of being a devotee, essential spiritual activities. So Lord Chaitanya didn't like when his devotees would abandon the bhakta dharma. And Gadadhar Pandit's vows to stay in Jagannath Puri and to always worship the Tota Gopinath deity, that's bhakta dharma. It's not just good karma, vows, ritualistic vratas. It's more than that. It's more internal than that. So this is why Mahaprabhu was externally angry. And here's a subtle point made in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Externally, the Lord demonstrated pranay rosha, the anger of love. Externally, he appeared angry. You can't do this. You can't come with me. Why are you proposing this? Externally, he's angry, but internally, the devotees all know the reality of their spiritual attachment. So they proceeded with Gadadhar Pandit coming along. And then Gadadhar Pandit came up with a novel idea. Okay, so you say that my going with you will produce in you guilt for my breaking my vows. Here's what we'll do. We're both going to the same place, to Navadvip, before you go to Vrindavan. I won't go with you together. I'll be doing my own thing. We just happen to be going to the same place. We just happen to be going to Mother Sachi's house, but there's no need for you to feel guilty because I'm just walking by myself. You do your thing, I do my thing. That worked for a while. And then finally, Lord Chaitanya came to a river the cross. And he said, okay, Gadadhar Pandit, this is enough. You've already broken your vows. You've left Puri. You didn't do your service to Tota Gopinath. You are simply thinking of your own happiness, not my happiness. That was a very strong thing to say to Gadadhar Pandit. If you're thinking about my happiness, you'll go back. And so, at that point, Lord Chaitanya gets into the boat. Gadadhar Pandit collapses on the ground. And Lord Chaitanya tells Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who's also there, you please take care of Gadadhar Pandit. Get him, bring him back to Jagannath Puri as I move on. And so you get this description of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya picking Gadadhar Pandit off the ground, who's fainted in separation, and telling him, that's the way the Leela is. Sometimes in our casual language, a situation comes and there's no other explanation but something like, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But the internal potency lingo is, that's the Leela. This is the way the Leela is going on. Come on, Gadadhar Pandit, let's go back to Puri. As you know, Mahaprabhu never made it to Vrindavan on that attempt. He came back to Puri, and he told the devotees upon his return, how could I go when Gadadhar Pandit wasn't letting me go? I didn't have his permission to go. He was feeling so upset, so I came back. And Gadadhar Pandit then pronounced, your attempt to go to Vrindavan is just to instruct the ordinary persons. But the fact is, wherever you are, that is Vrindavan. And so, at that point, Srila Prabhupada goes into a deep presentation about Vrindavan consciousness everywhere. He also does this in descriptions of Lord Chaitanya during the Rath Yatra, where Lord Chaitanya, in the bhava of Srimati Radharani, says, for most people, the mind and the heart are one, but for me, my mind and Vrindavan are one. So Prabhupada explains the consciousness of Vrindavan everywhere. A very deep, profound purport, showing you that Vrindavan consciousness is not about being physically situated there. Mahaprabhu's mind and Vrindavan are one because in his mind, the pastimes of Vrindavan are constantly taking place. It's an advanced point that requires some thought. So today is the appearance of Gadadhar Pandit. On a sad note, upon the disappearance of Mahaprabhu, Gadadhar Pandit didn't last very long in this world. He left soon thereafter. He couldn't bear the separation. So we can pray to Gadadhar Pandit for a deeper immersion in bhakti. He's such an intimate, or some say the most intimate member of the Panchatattva, especially in relation to Krishna's Madhurya Leela. Any questions?
Thank you for the class, Maharaj. You were mentioning about how the universal form was shown to Arjuna, and it said that also the sages from other planets, some of them were able to see. So you also mentioned about even if one sees the universal form, one still has the choice whether to believe or that Krishna is the supreme. So for us, we are very fortunate by Prabhupada's mercy to be at the temple and see the deities, be with the devotees. But we also have that choice. So how do we get that deeper conviction that even though we are seeing the deity, we are serving the Lord, we are amongst devotees, that it doesn't necessarily mean that we will believe that Krishna is God, as some people may say.
This is why daily sadhana is so important. We should never think that without daily sadhana we'll be able to maintain whatever transcendental position we may have. We can't maintain our perch, so to speak, without the daily practices of bhakti. So sometimes you have what you think is a great day. Oh, I came before the deities, looking at them was so wonderful. And then you slack off a bit in terms of your bhakti practices. And then you pick yourself up again. Steadiness impresses Krishna. And that steadiness in bhakti is the gateway to raga bhakti, spontaneous practice of devotional service. But without steadiness, we'll never get there. Yes.
Dear Guru Maharaj. Haribol. Haribol.
Can you just speak it?
Yeah.
I'll repeat it.
So in regards to vows, I was wondering if you could explain, or how can one understand which vows are more important? Like, for example, the vow of marriage versus a vow that one may make, maybe I'm not going to eat something, or the vows of chanting. Yeah, how does one know which are more important?
The basic vow is what we do at initiation, to chant at least 16 rounds and to follow the 4 rules. Such vows give you strength to carry you through all situations, because you're in the material world, which is Maya's kingdom, and your boat is always going to get rocked. You're on a boat, you're standing in a boat on a lake, and the waves in the lake are always rocking the boat. They're actually not touching you, but because we identify with the boat, we identify with the body, therefore we feel that the waves are rocking us. Prabhupada gave this example in Gainesville, Florida. A devotee asked, well, how is it that a devotee is not touched by the modes of material nature? So Prabhupada explained that you're standing in a rowboat in the middle of the lake. The waves are rocking the boat, but you're swaying back and forth, and because you identify as the boat, as the body, you think the waves are rocking you. So as we determinedly chant Hare Krishna, engage in Krishna's service, we become more conscious of Krishna. And then, pursuing those basic vows, we execute all the other vows that support our bhakti vows. Marriage, so on and so forth. That's in supportive of our bhakti dharma. But the most important thing in this age of Kali is to chant Hare Krishna. How can you chant Hare Krishna regularly without following the 4 rules? So our basic initiation vows are what we cling to. They're our shelter in the storm. And life in the material world means there's always some storm. So you have to have that daily shelter and gradually become attached to chanting Hare Krishna. That attachment comes from steadiness. As you become steady, your heart begins to cry out. Well, I'll quote Srila Prabhupada, because what do I know? He said, when you chant, you think, here is Krishna, here is Radha. May seem so far away from us, but that is where we're headed with our chanting. Here is Krishna, here is Radha. So all the other vows, in terms of our ashrama and so forth, they're meant to give us the foundation, the stability for chanting so that we can approach that consciousness. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. Here is Krishna, here is Rama, here is Radha. Okay?
Hare Krishna, Gurudev, you were speaking about Krishna's non-sectarian presentation of the different modes and belief systems which people inculcate into their lives, and we in Krishna consciousness especially taking on Prabhupada's perhaps the cutting approach of just everything except being a devotee is just not the practice, and we may look down on every sort of practice and think we are superior. And that may lead to some kind of pride and things like that. So how do we avoid thinking that we are, though understanding that we are taking on a very important and critical practice, at the same time not getting prideful and looking down on everyone else, even though they may have some sort of belief system that doesn't match this great practice?
First of all, bhakti is not a belief system. It's the art, science, and culture of engaging our senses in the service of the master of the senses. I always correct people when they, being friendly and open, being liberal, I respect your belief system. I was at a program in Sydney, and after the program, some young guys in their late 20s, Sydney-siders, kind of sophisticated, working in the banking world, the IT world, kind of cool Aussies, they called me over, hey, Swami, come sit with us. So I sat down at the table with them, and one of them very liberally and magnanimously said, yeah, so you're into Krishna, this one's into skiing, this one's into scuba diving, this one's into Buddhism. We're with you, Swami, we're with you. Whatever gets you through the night, you know? We're open to it. So then you might say, well, how can I just go with this flow? Or do I just say to them, have another samosa? Which often I do. The point is that Bhakti Dharma is topmost. Everything in Bhagavad Gita is leading up to that. That's why Krishna says, Jnana Yagena Chapyanye. There are others other than the Mahatmas. So Krishna's making the distinction. You don't have to ram that distinction down people's throat, but there is a distinction. The Bhakti Dharma is topmost, but we are not topmost. That's the difference. You should always think that. Although what Krishna says is the topmost, I'm not the topmost. All right?
Just a small question on the Gadadhar Pandit being asked to return to follow his vows at the river. The Lord Chaitanya, then the rules, the verse, where we follow the rules for the sake of following and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. obviously they have a high-level esoteric relationship, and Gadadhar Pandit fell flat. What is that in regards to that Shastric verse, is he following just for the sake of following?
It's a difficult point, Krishnadas Kaviraj says. He says, this is a very hard point to understand. But the example given by Kaviraj Goswami is, he says, remember Bhishma Dev and how Krishna treated Bhishma Dev. Krishna tolerated breaking his own promise to keep the promise of Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev had promised, unless Krishna breaks his promise and takes up a weapon to fight and save Arjuna, Arjuna's finished. I promise you that. The only thing that's going to stop it is if Krishna breaks his own promise. So Bhishma Dev is always mesmerized eternally by the scene of Krishna jumping down from the chariot, grabbing a chariot wheel, not even noticing that his top cloth had fallen off, and comes chasing after Bhishma Dev to kill him because Bhishma Dev had almost killed Arjuna. So this is an example of Krishna tolerating the breaking of his own promise. How does that relate to Lord Chaitanya and Gadadhar Pandit? Lord Chaitanya tolerated separation from Gadadhar Pandit just to keep Gadadhar Pandit's promises intact. They actually were broken at that point at the river, but Lord Chaitanya said, enough, get back there. So it's a very deep point, and to understand the point, you have to think about the relationship between Lord Chaitanya and Gadadhar Pandit, how deep it was that Lord Chaitanya tolerated separation for the sake of keeping Gadadhar Pandit's vows.
Just in that pastime, we hear that you mentioned that Gadadhar Pandit fell flat, and obviously I haven't read that or deep enough to understand that there would have been some very deep feelings from Lord Chaitanya at that point, which you could have elaborated there. I'm not saying you should have, I'm just saying I don't understand that bit, you know.
Yes, and I told you that what Kaviraj Goswami says is a difficult point to understand, the depths of the situation.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, Gaura Prabhupada.